Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Ladies and gentlemen, out of Brentwood, Tennessee, our speaker, Mr. Steve Lee. Come on. Mr. Steve Lee.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Steve Lee. I'm an alcoholic. And I'm thrilled to be here with you this weekend. I so appreciate the invitation. I appreciate Carrie for inviting me. And George has been a great host. I would say that John asked me this evening, has George been on his best behavior? I said, I just met George today. I don't know what his best behavior looks like. But I got nothing to compare tonight to. He says he knows I'm a real alcoholic. I know he's a real alcoholic because when he picked me up at the airport, I called him on my cell phone, and he said, I'm in the wine-colored Tahoe. I said, I'm thinking Chablis or red. I don't know. See, a lot of people would be in a red Tahoe, but George is still holding on to some things. And listen, I am excited to be here, and you know, I got really excited as I looked at the sobriety countdown or count up or whichever way we were going. But there were so many people here that were in that first year of being an Alcoholics Anonymous in sobriety, and I tell you from the bottom of my heart, I'm excited for you. And what I know, though, is that the truth is I'm probably more excited for you than many of you are for yourselves. And I get that because for me, it was not an exciting day when I showed up at Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't come to AA of my own volition. I'm one of those people who was negotiated into Alcoholics Anonymous, or at least into attendance. And I'm grateful for that, actually, because while I believe what we said, AA is not invested in trying to convince anyone that he or she is alcoholic. AA is absolutely invested in trying to offer the message of hope and recovery to anyone who's interested in it. But I showed up at Alcoholics Anonymous not understanding the problem I had, and certainly unaware of the solution that Alcoholics Anonymous offered. So it was while in your presence that I became acquainted with a problem. I identified that first key component of Alcoholics Anonymous, that identification, one alcoholic with another, happened for me. And then I had an opportunity to determine that, because I guess, two or three things happen for somebody like me that shows up at AA. One thing I got to decide is, am I alcoholic? And then once I decide that I'm alcoholic, I have the next question is, do I care? Some people are alcoholic, I'm just fine with it, thanks. My brother asked me one time if I thought he was alcoholic. I said, why do you ask? I said, because if you're alcoholic and your life is going just the way you want it to, everything's going great, then for God's sake, don't let me screw it up. But if things seem to be going off the rails, if you are seeing that alcohol seems to be an issue for you, if your life is problematic, then maybe there's time for a little further evaluation of one's relationship with alcohol, because that's where it started for me. I had to take a look at my relationship with alcohol. But anyway, so I'm excited for you, and we'll talk about that a little bit more, about how I got here. That's what I hope to do. It's what you invited me to do, among other things, is share what I was like and what happened, sort of what bumped me into Alcoholics Anonymous, and what my life's been like in my recovery. And I'm committed to doing that, but I'll warn you right up front, I'm not committed to doing it in any particular order. I dart back and forth. If something comes on my mind or on my heart to say it, I'm prepared to take some left turns, and sometimes we never get back. You know, I don't know whether it's divinely inspired or self-indulgent. You know, I'll let you determine that. But I'm open to what happens up here. There's a handful of stories that I typically tell, and the truth seems to fall in the slots in between the stories, the anecdotal stories. I said I'm going to tell you the truth. I mean that. But the fact is, I'm going to be honest with you, but I don't have the same commitment to accuracy. What I've determined is I'm often honestly mistaken. Sometimes I suffer from a past that never actually happened. I mean, it's, and what I also know is that, see, what I will share with you in fact is the experience of my life, what it felt like. I may be wrong. What I've realized is that other people were sometimes having a different experience at the same time. You know, I sat with my mother and my sister a couple of years ago, and we were discussing a family event. And as we sat and talked about it, we realized that we all had a different take on what had happened. So we had all had a different experience of that. I also know that a few years ago I went to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina to a conference, and just like George and I had been talking on the phone, my host there and I had been talking on the phone. We'd never met. I flew in, and we just weren't able to connect at the airport. I mean, and I'm getting on the phone, and he said, "Look, Steve, I'm over here by baggage claim number 6. And I said, "You can't be, man. I was just over there." And he said, "No, I'm there right now." He said, and I start walking over, and finally we connected. We realized the reason we had not been able to find one another is we had both described ourselves as much more attractive than we really are. And so what I realized is that how I see me is not always how other people see me. And how I see you is perhaps not how you see yourself. And the fact is, what I've discovered, that's a real truth for me in Alcoholics Anonymous, is that I'm not who I think I am. And I'm not talking past tense, I'm talking right now. I'm not who I think I am, and I'm not who you think I am. And I'm sure as hell not who I think you think I am. And the fact is, I've spent a tremendous amount of my time in my life trying to respond to what I think you think. And I'm wrong about the target I've been aiming at. See, I suffer from a disease that not only is manifested in this physical allergy to alcohol that we'll talk about, and this obsession that condemns me to drink even when I've made a firm decision that I don't want to, but at the core of that is an obsession with self, a selfishness and self-centeredness that has me constantly ever aware of me and what I think you think, and trying to respond to that and trying to elicit a certain reaction. There's a line in our book that one of those things that I identified with right away. See, one of the things that Alcoholics Anonymous did was give voice to my alcoholism. You gave voice to my problem that I didn't understand. I couldn't articulate. You know, I never sat around with somebody and talked about how I felt. Because the truth is, I couldn't have described to you that feeling before I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. And then I read in our literature where it said that the alcoholic, more than most, is an actor. He wears two faces. It's a stage character that he wants his fellows to see. He wants to be a man of certain reputation, but in his heart he knows he doesn't deserve it. And I read that and I realized that's how I'd been living my life. Trying so desperately to make a certain impression, and even when getting a favorable response, it left me feeling empty because I knew you were responding to the fraud. I felt fraudulent. Was never authentic. I think a lot of what happens for me in Alcoholics Anonymous as I get freer of the bondage of self through the process of these steps is that who I am gets to show up. I don't know that I'm a new man. I think I get to be the man I was always meant to be. I think that those things that aren't me begin to fall off, and I get to show up, and I get to finally be comfortable, and I get to be a man among men, and I get to relax. Oh, man, life was exhausting the way I was living in it. I don't mean just from my drunken escapades, but I mean from spending so much time in my head thinking and feeling and wondering. So we'll touch all those bases, or maybe we won't. We'll just see where we go. It starts, I've got a sobriety date, and it's June 30th, 1989, and I've got a home group. It's the backroom group of Alcoholics Anonymous. Meets every Saturday and Sunday morning at both 9 a.m. and 10:30. We have a literature study at 9, and we have a discussion meeting with a topic from conference-approved literature at 10:30. And it's a great meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. We have wonderful meetings. I believe that, and I'm attracted to that. But the reason that group is my home group is because of what happens between meetings, because of the outreach and the corrections work and the treatment facilities work and our fellowshipping one with another and activities that we do that include the family so we can share our sobriety and our recovery together. So I'm a very grateful member of the backroom group. If you're ever in Nashville, Saturday or Sunday, we invite you to come by and hope that you will. I've told you about June 30th, 1989, me and my sobriety date. That means now I'm going to share with you what is always the most embarrassing thing I share from the podium, and it's June 29th of 1989. And it's my last drink. See, I've only been here about 3 hours. I went to dinner with some people. I'm looking around here. I mean, the scars of alcoholism are very present in this room. This is a hard-looking bunch. And, I mean, some of you got here just in time, clearly. And a couple of you not quite. And my last drink was an amaretto on the rocks. Yeah, I'm just humiliated by that. No. But at least what you now know is I didn't know it was going to be my last drink when I took it. I mean, they'd had some little meeting, said, Steve, we've been talking, pal, and you can have one more drink. What will it be? Amaretto would not have made my top 10, but, I'd have been sucking off the neck of a vodka bottle or something. But the fact is, I was scheduled into a treatment facility on July the 1st of 1989. And scheduled is the deal. I was not going because I had had some epiphany that I needed or wanted to stop drinking. I had not decided my life needed some moral uplift. I wasn't looking for a big change. I was just going to fulfill my obligation to the legal system of Williamson County, Tennessee for the conviction of my 6th DUI a year before. And as a result of that, we had done a plea bargain agreement. That plea bargain got me some jail time, and they cut off some of that jail time if I would go to residential drug and alcohol rehabilitation. That sounded like a mouthful to me, but they were going to give me 60 days in jail or 10 weekends and 28 days in treatment. And even my public school math figured out that wherever it was, that was 60 days versus 48 days. So really only by virtue of 12 days am I here tonight. If it had been 48 days in jail and 60 days in treatment, I perhaps would have chosen jail. But the fact is, that's where I was going to be headed on July the 1st. On June 29th, my wife and I went out with 3 other couples. Not a big deal. One of the other guys is the one that got embarrassingly drunk. We had dinner, we came home, I had an amaretto, I smoked a joint, I went to bed. Yeah, there's no AA street cred in this story, I'm telling you. See, I'm just the poster boy for middle-class alcoholism, But here's one of the things I've discovered. Now there was a time that I used to punch this story up. But I finally saw in our literature where it said that we tell the new man exactly what happened to us. And what I believe the only thing of value that I bring to Alcoholics Anonymous is the truth about me. And I don't expect my story to resonate with everyone, but it will resonate with who it's supposed to resonate with. And that's why over time, that's why we share our stories with each other. Whether it's in a venue like this, or whether it's in our home group, or whether it's one-on-one over coffee, we share about ourselves. We give each other that opportunity for identification, and not just in the escapades, not just in the drunken behavior, but often in the way that I felt, that silent feeling I had sober on a Tuesday afternoon with a wife that loved me, with a kid that loved me, with a house and a car, and a life that seemingly looked in place. So why was I so unsatisfied? Why was I so insecure? Why was I walking around with this fear that I couldn't articulate, that I couldn't get my arms around, that I couldn't even have given a label to? What was missing? Why did I feel so disconnected from other people? Why was I so lonely? Lonely, not alone. Not that I was a social person. Not that I looked outgoing. I didn't look lonely. I didn't look shy. I don't believe people would have used those adjectives to describe me. It's the way I felt. And I worked so hard not to get caught feeling that way. So I don't think the people around, and when I drank, it was just easier to do that. But anyway, we did that. We came home. I had that amaretto. I smoked that joint. I went to bed. I got up on June the 30th, and my wife and I took our then 5-year-old daughter, Abby, to Chuck E. Cheese before Daddy was going away on a 28-day business trip. And so I know that so far I hadn't impressed you with this rough and tumble story, but this is where it turns ugly, at Chuck E. Cheese. Yeah. Don't spend your first day sober at Chuck E. Cheese. It is loud in there. And they're coming at you. They're short and just coming from every angle. You can't see them coming. And just as I'm getting my emotional balance in there, I see a 6-foot mouse. And I'm trying hard not to see this mouse. And finally, I asked Connie, I said, "Baby, do you see the mouse?" And she said it in her most loving tone. She said she did. And on July the 1st of '89, my friend Ricky came by to pick me up, to drive me off to a treatment facility, the Harbors of Brentwood. That's now just a couple. It was about 10 miles from where I lived then. It's just a couple of miles from where I live now. It's just a block from my office. It's now a assisted living facility. But Ricky's driving me over there. I don't have a clue what to expect. I don't know what this is going to be. He said, "Steve, what do you think this deal's going to be like, man?" I said, "I don't know, man. I don't have a clue." I said, "Well, I'll tell you one thing." I said, "I'm not getting in some little circle and going, 'I'm Steve, I'm an alcoholic,' and whine about the most intimate details of my life with a bunch of strangers." I said, about 3 weeks later, I was just telling people way more than they wanted to know about me. And I was making stuff up then, because amaretto and Chuck E. Cheese will get you nowhere in the treatment facility. You know. So, you know. I got there, Ricky let me out, I went in. I had no idea what to expect. They gave me a test immediately. And they call it an assessment, but it felt like, you know, it was harder than my ACTs. I mean, it's the hardest test I have ever taken. And you guys have seen versions of it, and we have our own 12 questions in Alcoholics Anonymous. But this was 30 questions, and they all began with the phrase, "Have you ever?" Yeah, that's overly rigid. And
Anybody got a black infinity almost under the canopy? Got a master count plate on it? You don't have to move it. That's the fire zone.
Black Infinity. That's not the first time a room full of alcoholics have been asked where their car is. We have misplaced those more than once. So I'm wandering in there, and they give me this test, 30 questions, "Have you ever?" And some of the questions were, "Have you ever drank in the morning? Have you ever drank alone? Have you ever had a blackout? Have you ever had a DUI? Have you ever had a problem at home because of drinking? Have you ever had a problem at work because of drinking?" I mean, 30 have you ever questions which you know had check yes or check no to what are clearly essay questions. You know, these are questions that beg for an explanation. You know. Now, you know what? I hope we have a good time in here tonight. There's a laughter. Our book says that, you know, laughter and cheerfulness make for usefulness. But if you're new, I know that you know that none of this was funny while it was happening. The only thing that brings some levity to my story to me today is that I'm on this side of it, that there's some time and perspective and sobriety that separates me from that moment. That morning, there was nothing funny. There was nothing funny about me studying those questions and having to check a box, yes or no, without an opportunity to explain myself, without what you're going to draw conclusions about me based on this. How can you do this? You don't know. How can you do this and not know? You know, have you ever drank alone? Well, yeah, you know, but they were gone. You know, we started together and they left, and I got questions about the questions. Have you ever drank in the morning? You know, what do you mean morning, really? I think it's a legitimate question because, see, I know what they're asking. In my mind, I know what they're asking. When they ask me if I'm drinking alone, I think they're asking me if I'm that guy that's got to lock the door, pull down the shades, unplug the phone, hide from the world in isolation and drink feverishly by myself. So I said, you know, what if I'm in the car on the way over to the party, drinking in the car? Is that alone drinking? There's another kind of alone drinking. I mean, how many of you, did anybody in here like me, did you have to have a few drinks before you went drinking? You got to show up ready to play. You know, you can't. Is that alone drinking? I mean, we're laughing here, but I am telling you, I am sweating these out. You know. And that morning drinking, I know what they mean. They're trying to get me, am I like that derelict alcoholic that's got to reach over and grab that half pint to take a pull at 6 in the morning before I can get my blood pumping and heart started and go meet the world before I can, you know, am I that guy that's got to throw it up twice where he can get it down? I heard those stories. But what if I'm up a little late drinking? 12:01 a.m. is technically the morning. What if I'm at last call at a very nice establishment? I need to clear this up. And see what I now know, you know, I am a blackout drinker, and it doesn't take much for me to black out. I know that that's not a prerequisite for alcoholics, but I love what the comedian David Tell says. He said he's a blackout drinker, as he likes to call it, time travel. And and I get that. You know, do you ever go, whoa, you know, how did I get here in the future and what has been going on? And try to figure this out without maybe asking direct questions to people. You maybe try to read their faces when you, how'd it go? Oh, was I just kind of cute, or did it go way off in the weeds, you know? And gosh, that's a tiring, it's just it's just kind of a pitiful way to live. Lots of times our alcoholism is defined by these huge dramatic moments, and there are many of them for many of us. But more regularly for a guy like me, it's just a day-by-day, tacky, tawdry, not showing up, not remembering, not caring, breaking every promise and vow to the people I love the most. It's just a wearing away of all my personal integrity and who I think I am and who I would like to be and who I want you to think I am. An inability to show up for life in a way that it looks like everybody else is to me. And an inability to say out loud that I've got a problem with that. That's what it feels like to a guy like me. Anyway, what I'm grateful for is when I began to go to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, I discovered right away, you folks shared with me that how I answered the questions on that test isn't what makes me alcoholic. Those are the kind of questions that might expose my alcoholism. It might be a red flag to my alcoholism. It might shine a light on my alcoholism. But I believe what makes me alcoholic, the first thing that I could grab hold of when I was trying to figure out what AA said an alcoholic was, because that's what I started doing when we were going out to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm a guy that decided to pay attention. Some people just do their time, but I decided to really pay attention because I didn't want to be alcoholic. I wasn't saying I was an alcoholic. In our little meetings in the treatment facility, it would go around the room and I would say I'm a problem drinker. I knew that I had problems associated with my drinking. But I knew if I said out loud I was alcoholic, somebody was going to suggest I not drink anything at all. And that was going to be an overcorrection to the problem I've got. I met a guy, I was about 6 years sober living in Richmond, Virginia. I went to pick a guy up one day. It was for work as a sales manager flying in town, and I'd never met him. I'm going to pick him up. We're going to have lunch. We're going to go make a sales call. We're going to have dinner. I'm going to put him on an airplane the next morning. I pick him up. We go to lunch. At lunch, he orders a beer. He orders a second beer. He notices I'm not drinking. When he orders his third beer, he says, "Steve, I hope you don't mind me drinking this beer." He didn't know I was in AA or out, it just hadn't come up and it wasn't necessary. And I said, "No, I don't mind at all." I said, "In fact, if that's going to make you more effective on this sales call, I'm buying, because I need this to go well." And so we go do our deal, and then we go to dinner that night. At dinner, he starts having a drink, a second, a third, a fourth. He starts talking to me. He said he was in a little trouble at work, that they were on him, and his drinking had become a problem there. He still doesn't know anything about me being in AA. He said his wife was on him about his drinking. In fact, he said his wife had sent her brother, who's in AA, over to talk to him. Now, I got to tell you, the brother-in-law 12-step call, that's got to be tough. And but I asked him a question. And we know it's not a fair question, but I wasn't drinking. I had to have some fun. And I said, you got all these problems. I said, have you ever thought about just stopping? And he gave me an answer that still resonates with me today. He said, "Steve, I'm afraid I'll stop, and I really didn't have to." I get that. I mean, whoa. He was just doing what we tell people all the time. He didn't want to quit 5 minutes before the miracle. And see, he was hoping for some new miracle of control. He was hoping like I had hoped. I didn't understand until I'm at Alcoholics Anonymous, and I see in our book when it says the great obsession of every abnormal drinker is that one day I'll control and enjoy my drinking. Now, I tell you, let's not get confused about what control and enjoy looks like on a guy like me. It doesn't mean drink and not get drunk. It means drink and get just drunk enough. You ever want to get just drunk enough? See, and what just drunk enough is for a guy like me is I want to drink just enough to get everything alcohol does for me without suffering any of the pains of what it began to do to me. Because, see, sometimes I drank and it went amazingly well, particularly early in my drinking career. I love what it says in A Vision for You when it talks about what most normal folks get from a few drinks. It says for most normal folks, drinking means conviviality, joyous intimacy with friends, colorful imagination, release from care, boredom, and worry, and a feeling that life is good. I got a little thirsty just then. That's an attractive package. But that's not what I get. See, and it goes on to say that not so for those of us in the latter days of our drinking. That's not what I said. Maybe momentarily. See, maybe, I don't know, drink 3, drink 4. Maybe that's the way I feel. Maybe I get that release. Maybe I get relaxed, and then, so maybe that's between 9:30 and 11 for me, maybe. That's when but then comes awakening to face the hideous 4 horsemen: terror, bewilderment, frustration, despair. Oh, I know those 4 bedfellows. I was just looking for a little joyous intimacy with friends. And I wake up with those 4 bastards. Where did you guys come from? And usually we were in jail together. And in 1980, I was living in Atlanta, Georgia, and I was at a TGI Fridays one afternoon. That's already told you a lot about me. It was the afternoon, so I should have been at work, but I wasn't. I was at this Fridays. I was throwing back kamikaze shooters and taking Tuinals. I left there. I got on the interstate going the wrong way, east in the westbound lane of I-285 in the perimeter. I hit a car head on. 2 other cars hit us. It totaled all 4 cars. It sent some people to the hospital. It sent me to jail. I came to the next morning. I had urinated on myself and I'd vomited on myself, or I hope I did, because somebody did. And I know some of you have been in the drunk tank before, and rule number 1 is just find a wall to back up against and stay upright, and I was not successful in either case. So, if you go down, the stains you wake up with may or may not be of your own making. But I prefer to think that's an indignity I inflicted on myself. But there I was, and in all seriousness, that morning, in that state, I was as afraid as I had ever been at the consequences, legal, personal, and professional, that awaited me. I was as ashamed as I'd ever been at the harm I'd caused other people. And I didn't yet know the extent of the injuries of other people in the accident. None turned out to be life-threatening, but I did get sued over that and should have been. I was humiliated at the state I found myself in, my own urine and my own vomit. And I was as certain as I had ever been that I'll never drink again. I have crossed a line that even I can't live with. I'm done. 10 days later, I'm driving down the road smoking a joint, drinking a bottle of wine, thinking, ooh, I nearly overreacted to that. Now, it sounds crazy in here. It didn't sound crazy then. It didn't feel crazy. It didn't feel like lack of power. See, I didn't have any of this language to talk to even reference. It felt like, wait a minute, I'm going to be more careful. It felt like, so I wasn't going to stop drinking. Most of the time, I was not going to stop drinking. I was not going to let that happen again. I wasn't going to do that again. I won't do that to her, you know. When my daughter was born on December the 17th of 1983, I was drunk. I wasn't going to do that again. I broke every vow I made to my wife on our wedding day. I wasn't going to do that again. But the way I was not going to do that again is I was going to be more careful when I drank. But I didn't know that I've got this allergy to alcohol that once I take a drink makes me totally unpredictable. And never once did when the book says that the doctor's theory that we have an allergy interests us, it explains that for which we could not otherwise account. Man, did I embrace that. It interested me when I saw it. It did explain that for which I could not otherwise account. It explained those times when I meant, with me it wasn't always how much I was going to drink, it was often when I was going to be home, you know, how long I was going to stay. Kidding with my wife earlier, I said, I'll be home at 7. She'd go, you're going to have to be more specific, AM or PM, you know, Tuesday or Thursday, you know. November or December, we got to drill down on this a little bit. See, never once was I someplace taking a drink and then having that second drink and turning to the guy next to me at the bar and go, whoa, I don't know about you, but that phenomenon of craving just kicked in on me. Can you feel it, brother? It didn't feel like that. I didn't know that's what was happening. I just thought, I was going to stay till 7. I just thought I'd change my mind. I never went, oh, there's lack of power's kicking in now. I didn't think in those terms. I didn't feel powerless. What I felt and what people were telling me. People weren't calling me alcoholic. The people now I'm collecting these DUIs. I totaled 6 automobiles. I had a lot of drunken behavior. And what I know is that once I drink, my behavior is drunken behavior, not necessarily alcoholic behavior. You can take a non-alcoholic and pour the same amount of alcohol in him that I drank, and we're going to look a lot alike. But what I didn't know was that, see, lack of power, that's an interesting deal. I was at a meeting not long ago. It's now been, I guess, a year or two, but a guy was saying, lack of power is my problem. And it just made me think, because I know when the book suggests that, it says lack of power is my dilemma. And I had never looked up the word dilemma, and I finally did. And dilemma is a problem with 2 equally unacceptable solutions. Once I get to Alcoholics Anonymous, lack of power is my dilemma. Lack of power is not my problem. My problem is that I don't know I don't have power. My problem is trying to exercise power I don't have. Once I realize I don't have power, the problem is, the dilemma is, am I willing to do something about it? AA says there's a solution. Once I got here, all of you folks that are new, the game has changed for all of us that are here. There's a solution. Right after it says there's a solution, it says almost none of us liked. The self-searching, the level of pride, the admission to shortcomings that the process requires for its successful consummation. So the dilemma is whether to die an alcoholic death or live life on a spiritual basis. The dilemma is whether to accept spiritual help or go on to the bitter end. The dilemma for me is now, am I willing to do, to grasp hold of the solution that you have provided me, that we read about that says it works. And it says willingness will be the key. You know, when we were reading earlier, it said those who do not recover, people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program. I regularly have to decide if I'm a will not or a cannot. So I finally looked up willingness. That didn't take me but 21 years. Willingness is doing that which I would not do as a matter of course. And I know that that's true because there's not a single thing Alcoholics Anonymous has asked me to do that I was just about to do before I got here. This was not going to happen naturally. No. Everything you have asked me to do is counterintuitive to the guy that showed up here. That's why I need that entire psychic change, that profound alteration in my reaction to life. In Bill's story, he says, common sense became uncommon sense. Today, many of those things are intuitive. I begin to, when I clear away those things that block me off from that power, then more and more I do naturally what AA would encourage me to do. I find it easier to live by these principles than I used to, at least in the glaring opportunities. The growth is harder. You know, it gets more subtle and more subtle the way I've got to apply the principles of AA. It's sort of like going on a diet. You know, the first 10 pounds is easy, but the last few pounds you really got to work hard. And I have to continue to look for it. It says the point, I'm not going to come anywhere near perfect adherence to the principles that AA outlines. The point is I'm willing to grow along spiritual lines, and that has to be true for me today just like it was. And for me to do that, I got to be willing to have some problems today. You know, I did an inventory about 3 years ago now. I'd gotten a new sponsor. My sponsor, Frank, had passed away. I did this inventory, and pride turned out to be the glaring defect of character that was prevalent in all 3 areas of investigation. And I was shocked, you know, and I went to Don. I said, you know, I just didn't see this pride. He said, I suspect the people around you had a view of it. He said, but see, Steve, pride can't spot pride. Now, when I saw that pride was my issue, I got to decide if I'm willing to believe that, you know. Because if I'm unwilling to have a problem, as my friend Bob says, I'll have it forever. So I got to go, yeah, man. You know, it's almost like, I guess, I don't know why I'm even going to share this. It's so tacky, but it's sort of like going out. What if a little later, what if somebody walked up here in a couple of minutes and leaned in and said, Steve, your fly's down. Now, that would be embarrassing. That would make me uncomfortable. But if you don't tell me, I'm doomed to walk around with my fly down for the rest of the night. And that's the way it is with these defects of character. When I stumble across something or when somebody brings something to my attention, I got to go, I wish that wasn't true. But if it is, I need to own it, spot, admit, and correct. Go to my higher power and say, what can we do about this? Anyway, I'm going to drink a little bit more. I'm going to be sober a little bit, and then we'll get out of here in a little while. I grew up in Smyrna, Tennessee. I told you I wasn't going to go in any chronological order. This is sort of like a Quentin Tarantino movie. Just a host of seemingly unrelated stories that I hope come together by the end of the hour. But I grew up in Smyrna, Tennessee, small town. I was a good kid from a middle-class family. Got an older brother, an older sister, a younger sister. Mom and Dad were together. Nobody was knocking anybody around. It just, you know, was no circumstantial reason for me to be alcoholic. And I decided, I was a kid that went where he said he was going to go, came home when he said he was going to come home, hung out with who I said I was going to hang out with. I didn't color outside the lines. I often wanted to, but I didn't want to draw that kind of attention to me. I was a kid that played within the rules. And I decided not to drink, too. I wasn't going to be a drinker. When I was in high school, I was playing sports, doing stuff. I said, hey, I'm not going to drink. And that wasn't hard. It wasn't hard for me not to drink. And I was around people who were drinking and doing drugs and doing everything that you did in the 60s and 70s. And finally, when I was a freshman in college, two guys came by and picked me up, buddies of mine, to go back to our high school to a basketball game, and they hand back a bottle of Boone's Farm Strawberry Hill wine. I heard somebody groan, and it always bothers me when that happens in an AA meeting. But I know the only two drinks you know about are not impressive so far. But you know, AA is really quite a place. We'll come to an AA meeting, you know, and brag about holding up convenience stores and having 4 wives in 3 states, you know. But ooh, I didn't drink the Boone's Farm, and yeah. We'll plant our flag at some pretty interesting places. But anyway, they handed back that bottle of Boone's Farm, and I took a couple of pulls off of it. And you know, by the time we got where we were going, the experience I had was that I couldn't wait to get where we were going, because I thought the people there couldn't wait to see me when we got there. I was free of the bondage of self. I was not self-conscious. We talk about alcohol sometimes being a social lubricant, and that's very much the effect it had on me. I mean, literally, that's a visual for me that without the alcohol, I am uncomfortable. I'm like the ball in the pinball machine. I'm bumping into everything. I'm unsteady. I'm unsure. Then you lubricate me, and I can move easily amongst you. There's no friction. I felt comfortable. I felt at ease, and I had a great time. I blacked out that night. Like I said, I'm a blackout drinker. It just doesn't require much, and I just thought that was pretty common. But and I don't know if I was alcoholic before I took that drink, and I don't know if I was alcoholic right after I took that drink, and I don't know when I became alcoholic. I have an opinion, but I don't know if I drank alcoholically from that moment on, because I drank so enthusiastically from that moment on. And see, if you're not trying to exercise any power, if you're not trying to control your drinking, I don't know whether I could have stopped and never drank again the next day. I don't know if I could have decided to drink 2 drinks a day for the rest of my life. I never tried. And in our book, it says that in the doctor's opinion. It says, while we have no way of proving it, many of them believe they could have stopped drinking early in their drinking career. And I think they couldn't prove it because, like me, they didn't try it. So by the time I reached a point where I needed to try to moderate my drinking, I was unable to do so for whatever reasons that I couldn't explain at the time. I thought it was a lack of character. I thought it was a lack of maturity. As I said, people weren't calling me alcoholic. They were calling me immature, irresponsible, told me to grow up, told me to be a man, told me to be a husband, told me to be a father. All those things I was unable to do. So I drank like that and just drank my way through college and out of college, and then went to work in this family business. And, you know, people told me I was going to be pretty good at it. It was a sales business, and I had a decent personality. And I'm that guy that a lot of us claim to be. You know, in AA, we talk a lot about our potential. It's usually us telling each other about it, but it's a rumor we started. But I'm not sure we're much different than the population at large, but early on I was very afraid to really try to do anything, because I would much rather be, hey man, that Steve, he's such a sharp guy, if he would just try, if he would just get his act together, rather than if I really did give it my best effort, man, that Steve, you know, he really tries, he just doesn't have it. And I was pretty sure that's what would happen if I ever really, really applied myself, that I would realize how extraordinarily ordinary I am. Today, being extraordinarily ordinary is comfortable for me. It's a place I'm willing to be. But I took that job, and I got to tell you, I was traveling at the time in Tennessee, Alabama, and Georgia, calling on little furniture stores in these rural towns, and cold calls, and I just couldn't do it. And I'd pull into a town and tear out the yellow pages and see where I'm supposed to be going, and I'd pull up there and not go in. And then I'd go to the next place and not go in. And sometimes I'd wait till the manager or owner I'd sit out till he would leave and go to lunch, and then I would go in and ask for him and leave my card and say, tell him I was by. And then I'd have to call my brother at the end of the day. You know, everybody, it wasn't cell phone times then. I'd have to give a call report, you know, and make up a lie. For 2 years, you know, I didn't sell anything. They begin to notice after a while if you know. And I'm just going to these, and then I'm checking in these little motor lodges, and I am unplugging the phone, and I am pulling down the shades and locking the door and sitting there and drinking and just hiding because I can't show up. I moved to New Orleans. I met my wife, Connie. I told you my buddy Ricky took me to treatment. Well, Ricky's taken me to a couple of the most important destinations of my life. Ricky came over one night, and he said, Steve, it was a Monday night, and he said, Steve, go with me down here to this bar that was on the other side of town. I said, man, I don't want to go. I was worn out. It had been a long, hard weekend, and what I didn't know is that he had been set up on a blind date with this woman that had just moved back in town after a divorce. And he wanted me to go with him and be the wingman to take the ugly girlfriend. And so I go with him, and the girl that's supposed to be his blind date is next month will be my wife of 30 years. But so Connie and I met in a bar over a pile of cocaine, hers, and which was terribly attractive to me. And you know, a few months later, we went down to Mexico on a trip and drank something out of a coconut and got on a boat and went out to international waters. An Austrian captain read the wedding ceremony in Spanish, and we said I do to vows we didn't understand. And there's still some contention in our tonight as to what we agreed to. I've brought a few things up she doesn't remember, but in fact, Connie, you know, when Ricky took me off to that treatment center that morning, Connie walked us out to the car, and the last thing she said to me as I was headed off was, no matter what, baby, don't stop drinking. I know a lot of you didn't get that kind of support from your spouse, but that Connie's rock solid, and now, 10 days later, she stopped drinking, and so I tell people I know that time shouldn't matter in Alcoholics Anonymous, but that's a really important 10 days to me, and I lord it over her regularly, and if we have a little disagreement at our house, I don't care if we're trying to figure out what TV show to watch. You know, I just say, wait, in 10 days, this will clear up for you, baby. Just, I wish you could see what I can see from this spiritual mountaintop. And now, you know, the fact is that she's a great member of Alcoholics Anonymous. She stopped drinking, but it was almost 4 years later before she came to AA. She said she would have gotten to AA a lot sooner if I hadn't been so helpful in trying to get her to come. And so when I stopped helping is when she began to show up, and she's an active member, and she sponsors women, and she has a book study at our house with the women she sponsors, and you know, we're both so grateful for the relationship that we have today. That 5-year-old daughter, Abby, is now 28 years old, and you know, about 5 years ago, this is a guy that was drunk the night she was born in that hospital. And about 5 years ago, we were driving downtown in Nashville to listen to a friend play some music, and I was telling her about a conversation I'd had earlier that day with my brother, and it was not any altercation. He was just saying, Steve, I don't get it. He says, I don't think you need to do all that stuff you do to stay sober, to keep from drinking. The activity looked excessive to him, and I was telling Abby about that, and she said, you know, Dad, you and Mom do more than stay sober. She said, you help people. Now, I'm not confused about what that help is. That's what we do. We just talk to each other. But what I want you to hear is that I got a daughter who thinks that her mom and dad are living useful, purposeful lives. We got a text one night about 1 a.m. it dinged, and Connie grabbed it and woke me up, and she says, look at this. She says, it was our daughter was texting. She was out with a friend, and it said, I'm so glad you guys are sober. And then the next text came a couple of minutes later, and she said her friend Erin, her dad was in that same bar they were in and drunk and making a scene and an embarrassment, at least to his daughter. And she said, I'm so glad you guys are sober. So we know that it's through God's grace. It's not virtue. It's certainly not intelligence. We try to give back in every way that we can in Alcoholics Anonymous. We try to share with new people. I came out of that treatment facility, and I decided about 3 weeks in that I did want to be sober, and that Alcoholics Anonymous is how I wanted to do it. And I went down to 202 the Friendship House in Nashville, and I ran into a guy named Frank D. Big Frank was about 6'5" and about 280 pounds at the time. When he died in 2008, he was a much smaller man. And, you know, maybe he was never that big. Maybe he just looked that big to me. But Frank and the guys in the little room I wandered into were in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and they were having a book study, and I didn't even know there was such a thing. See, I'd much rather been in a discussion meeting. I still love a good discussion meeting, primarily because I can't wait to hear what I have to say in one. Know that no matter how far off track I take it or what I say, that the next person is going to be involved in the solution that Alcoholics Anonymous offers through the steps and through our literature, that we're going to be right back there. And so Frank set the foundation for my recovery in the literature of Alcoholics Anonymous. He said, Steve, come on in here, man. He said, where the message, the integrity of the message is protected. And I think that served me well. A year later, I moved to Richmond, Virginia, where I spent 8 years, and I got a sponsor over there named Joe. Joe introduced me to practice principles in all my affairs. And Joe introduced me to the third legacy of Alcoholics Anonymous. He got me involved at the district level, at the area level. He had me, you know, he had been a delegate, and he just got me involved in all those aspects. And Joe helped me see things a little differently, and that's what you begin to do. Once I sober up, and once I begin to practice these steps, and once I begin to have this alteration in my reaction to life, and see things a little differently. I was at a meeting one night, and I'd spoken almost as long as I've spoken tonight, you know, and it wasn't a speaker meeting. And I got home, I called Joe. He had been at the meeting. I said, Joe, did I sound self-righteous in that meeting tonight? He said, oh, Steve, he said, you're asking all the wrong questions. He says, because the question isn't, did you sound self-righteous? He said, the question is, were you self-righteous? And he said, see, you really don't care if you were self-righteous or not. He said, you're afraid they caught you. You're afraid somebody's driving home going, boy, that's Steve. He's a self-righteous son of a gun. But the question is, were you? And he said, if you were, try not to do it again. If you weren't, try not to worry about it. I said, well, it's got to be more complicated than that. You know? I called Joe a few years ago. My brother and I had bought a little building. We were moving our offices into this building, and as we were buying furniture and desks and things for this business, we thought, hey, this would be a good time to buy some furniture for our homes and bill it through the company and get the tax advantages that come with that. And I'm just running it by, I'm just talking to Joe. I'm not even looking for feedback. You know, you got to be careful when you talk to him. And he said, Steve, I don't think I would do that. And he wasn't telling me what to do. He never has. But he said, I don't think I would do that. And I said, well, Joe, I know it sounds a little bit like tax fraud. And he went, no, it actually is tax fraud. See, I mean, that might seem like but that's a key. That's the way I've lived my whole life. And sometimes it's a little bit. It's kind of, he said, no, that is tax fraud. And he said, Steve, I don't care what you do. He says, but in Alcoholics Anonymous, one of the things we get to do is start seeing, is that me? Must be time for me to stop. Yeah, oh, that's that. Actually, he thinks it's time for me to stop. You helped me begin to see the truth. See, what I was never able to do is see things as they really are and make my decisions in life based on the truth, and then live with the consequences of what they are. Since that went off, I am going to end this thing, and one of the other things we're encouraged to do is talk about how we establish a relationship with the power greater than ourselves. See, I got a problem I can't solve. I can't think my way out of it. I can't learn my way out of it. I can't talk my way out of it. I can't attend meetings my way out of it. Ultimately, I've got to put these steps into application in my life in such a way that allows that power to work through me in a way that makes a drink unnecessary and hopefully allows me to live a life which is both happily and usefully whole, where that disconnection that I felt before is out of the way and I begin to feel connected to the rest of this world. And that was tough for a guy that showed up at AA without any real belief. I'm one of those guys that didn't have a religious belief, and I'm not a religious guy today. When we'd get up and say the prayer at the end of the meetings, I wouldn't hold hands and I wouldn't say the prayer, and I'd step away from the group. A guy asked me one day, he said, "Steve, what's that about, man?" I said, "Well, I said, I don't know what I believe." I was being earnest. I said, "I don't know what I believe, you know, and I'm not willing to hold hands and sing Kumbaya with the rest of the campers and just to go along and get along." And he said, well, he said, this guy had heard my first confessional version of a fifth step, and he knew that I'd broken all the vows of my marriage. He knew that I had stolen time and money from my company. He knew that I was drunk when that baby was born. And he said, "So all of those things, and you don't want to be a hypocrite." He says, "I'm very impressed with where you draw the line, Steve." He said, "I got good news for you and bad news for you." And I said, "I'll play," you know. And he said, I said, "What's the bad news?" He said, "The bad news is hypocrisy is way down your list of problems. And you might ought to address them in the order in which they'll kill your ass." I said, "What's the good news?" He said, "The good news is there's room for another hypocrite in Alcoholics Anonymous." And that's still good news for me tonight, because I'm often going to look like a hypocrite. Sometimes I'm going to sound like a hypocrite. And even worse, sometimes I'm going to be a hypocrite. It won't be on purpose. It's just going to happen. But Alcoholics Anonymous isn't where I have to be perfect. This is where you allow my imperfection to stay here and grow through the problems that I have. This is not where I get kicked out for doing poorly. It's where you reach a hand back and help me up when I stumble. That's what, if you can't mess up in AA, where can you mess up? It's in We Agnostics that I was finally able to grab hold of something that works for me. It says, you know, that no one can fully define or comprehend that power which is God. And I realized for 8 years sober, I'd been trying to find a definition, a picture and a profile of God that I could work with. But no one can fully define or comprehend that power. That gave me some comfort. It goes on to say that deep within every man, woman, and child is a fundamental idea of God. That means that if he's deep within me, he's deep within each and every one of you, and that has become my connection to the human race. That is what now connects me to everyone. It says, as I draw near to him, he will disclose himself to me. Well, the way I draw near to him is to draw near to you. What you've done for me this weekend is allow me to be here and share my life with you, and you share your life with me over the course of this weekend. And this power shows up in a way that I can't define or comprehend, and it works in my life in a way that makes my life happily and usefully whole. I couldn't be more grateful for that opportunity. There was a gentleman in Nashville named Mo H., and Mo always ended his talks with the verse to a poem, and it was a short little poem. And when he first gave that poem, when I first heard it almost 15 years ago, I knew it explained what my experience had been in Alcoholics Anonymous much more succinctly than I've done tonight. And when Mo came down, became ill in 2003, and we knew his time was short, we went to breakfast one morning. It was almost exactly 9 years ago tonight, and he died in mid-December of that year. And when we had breakfast, I said, "Mo, would you mind when I get a chance to share my talks that I end with that poem? It'll help me remember you, but more importantly, in the truest sense of Alcoholics Anonymous, it will help me pass on what you've given to me and so many others." And he said, "Oh, Steve, if you think it'll help another drunk, See, that's all he really cared about. He was a great member of AA, and he loved Alcoholics Anonymous, but he loved alcoholics. And sometimes those are mutually exclusive. You know, sometimes a guy like me gets here and sobers up. About a half hour later, I got no tolerance for alcoholics. They can really screw up our meetings sometime. But Mo loved them. And he said, if you think it'll help another drunk, and I know it has from that day till this, because it's always helped me. And I sought my God I could not see. And I sought my soul eluded me. But I sought my fellow man and found all three. Thank you so much for having me here this evening.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.